Welcome everyone to this Community IT webinar, the Nonprofit IT Essentials for Challenging Times. We're joined today with Nuradeen Aboki, who's a senior consultant here at Community IT. We're going to talk about making hard choices in our current climate and facing the challenges with our essential IT intact. We plan to talk about governance and policies that help you manage risks, how to budget wisely. We'll also talk about when in-house or outsourcing IT can add value, especially if your nonprofit is facing staffing cuts or major disruptions in your programs or your funding. We want to talk about how you keep their IT lights on in the midst of these changes and challenges. And how do you protect your nonprofit staff and your nonprofit against attacks? So how do you, on the top of all that, how do you maintain a healthy workplace with all of these mounting stresses and uncertainty? So my name is Carolyn Woodard. I'm the Outreach Director for Community IT, and I'm the moderator today. And I'm very happy to hear from our senior consultant, Nura, who has been calming clients down for decades and will help us sort through our priorities and how to think about making a plan. But first, I'm going to go over our learning objectives. So our learning objectives are, by the end of this session today, we'll learn about IT governance policies and why they are a necessity for nonprofits at any time, but especially now. Learn what to prioritize in your IT, cybersecurity, data security, staff security, basics, and more. We're going to learn how to budget for IT and how you can use that budgeting process to find value and make decisions. We're going to talk about staying healthy and motivated as a nonprofit or a nonprofit IT professional. And we're going to review at the end how to make a plan to move forward. We know we're not going to be able to get into all of this. It's only an hour, but we're really happy that you're spending the hour with us. I want to acknowledge that this moment is suddenly very adversarial in general. I have some friends who worked at nonprofits that were in, certain advocacy areas where they knew going into it, they were going to have a lot of maybe adversarial attacks, a lot of politics involved. And they kind of went into that job knowing that that was what they wanted to do, and they were okay taking that security risk to do the job, the advocacy that they were really passionate about. But I feel like in the past year or so, just the nonprofits that were never controversial before are suddenly facing maybe a lot more adversarial attacks online, in this administration, in this political environment than we've ever faced before. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I know a lot of people are feeling a lot of stress. A lot of us are really scared about what's going to happen to our job, to this sector, to our organization. So I hope this webinar will help us breathe, prioritize, and give ourselves some time in the midst of everything being on fire all the time to be together and talk this through, talk about what we're going to do next, and what does any of this have to do with nonprofit IT. And I'm really happy that my colleague Nura is joining us today because, as I said, in addition to his decades of experience in IT and as a senior consultant with so many of our clients, he's also very, very calm. So Nura, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. It's been a pleasure being here. My name is Nuradeen Aboki, Senior Consultant in Community IT. I've been with Community IT for about 16 years, helping nonprofit organization clients in IT planning, management, strategy, and overall just taking a look at that nonprofit IT solutions and making sure they're a right fit to meet our clients where they need to be in terms of their mission and values. So today, I'm really thrilled to talk about these times that we're in and how we can take a look at IT and make the right investments and choices.
And I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Carolyn Woodard. I'm the Director of Marketing at Community IT. And before I was in marketing here, I worked for a couple of different nonprofits, a very small one and a large international one, working in IT. I was an IT director, if you can believe it, which is just proof that you need to be a manager, not necessarily have a tech background to be successful as a technology director, to be helping shepherd technology through at your organization. I'm really happy to be here also. And thank you all to you for joining us today. Before we begin, if you're not familiar with Community IT, I want to tell you a little bit more about us. We're a 100% employee-owned managed services provider. We provide outsourced IT support. We work exclusively with nonprofit organizations, and our mission is to help nonprofits accomplish their missions through the effective use of technology. We are big fans of what well-managed IT can do for your nonprofit. We serve nonprofits across the United States. We've been doing this for over 20 years, almost 25 years next year. We are technology experts, and we are consistently given the MSP 501 recognition for being a top MSP, which is an honor we received again in 2024. We host a weekly podcast, and we do this monthly free webinar series. You can also access all of our previous webinar videos and transcripts on our website at communityit.com, and you can register for upcoming webinars there. For these presentations, Community IT is vendor agnostic, so we only make recommendations to our clients and only based on specific business needs. We never try to get a client into a product because we get an incentive or benefit from that. But we do consider ourselves a best of breed IT provider. It's our job to know the landscape, to know what tools are available, reputable, and widely used. And we make recommendations on that basis for our clients based on their business needs, their priorities, and their budget. And a little bit more about us. Our mission is to create value for the nonprofit sector through well-managed IT. And we also identify 4 key values as employee owners that define our company: trust, knowledge, service, and balance. We seek always to treat people with respect and fairness, to empower our staff, clients, and sector to understand and use technology effectively, to be helpful with our talents, and we recognize that the health of our communities is vital to our well-being and that work is only a part of our lives. And now I would like to ask everyone a thought question, which is, what nonprofit IT governance policies do you need? And while you're kind of reflecting on that, don't worry. Our next slide, we're going to tell you a little bit about some of the bedrock IT governance policies. And I just want to say before we really get into this that Nura and I did a webinar specifically on governance and policies last year. So we're not going to go in depth to it here. If you're in a situation where you need more information on these policies and governance, do go check that out on our website, and I'll put that link in our chat as well. But today we really wanted to especially touch on data retention policy, especially if you might be facing subpoenas or leaks, etc., in the current environment. And I know policy sounds really boring at a time when we might feel like we just want to be out there taking action, writing our congressman and doing all the things that we need to do to protect our organization and our sector. But Nura, I would like to ask you to draw on your experiences over the decades of advising our nonprofit clients and just take it maybe back a step. What kind of trouble can a nonprofit get into if they never get around to creating these essential policies?
Well, so fundamentally, having no policies can leave employees unsure of what to do in the event of an incident. It could be a security incident as simple as, hey, I lost my laptop or it's stolen, or what applications to use at the workplace. And then where do I store my data? Who do I share my data with? So there are a lot of questions that employees are left with without any guidance or governance, especially without any IT policy. Um, One of the biggest risks is actually data exfiltration or data leakage. So having an IT policy is foundational. Every organization should spend time and make the investments to consider some essential policies, especially the ones that we've listed here on the slides. And I noticed on the chat that there's a common theme, as some have mentioned, some of this that we already have on the slides, such as acceptable use policies. Cybersecurity policies could include the data retention policy, privacy policy, as well as AI acceptable use policy. So initial policies help protect the organization from honest mistakes, disgruntled staff, and security vulnerabilities.
And I think recently, I know some cybersecurity liability policies, they will want to know that you have an acceptable use policy. And also, we have the new auditing guidelines for nonprofits that include IT risks. And they're going to ask you, do you have an acceptable use policy? And if you don't have one, you can't really hold employees accountable. Like you can do training with them on how not to click on that link or, how to stay secure, where to keep their data and keep that secure. But you don't have any recourse if something happens if you don't have a policy. Can you talk a little bit just quickly about what kind of barriers you see at our clients that kind of keep them from really having strong policies?
Yeah, so certainly leadership is one of the uh, I think it's lack of understanding from leadership. Why is IT, why does IT require policies? So sometimes leaders are focused on their mission, and IT is given little or no attention. As you find that with leaders that do have an understanding of how important technology is to help their nonprofit achieve its mission, give time and investments to that department. So you find that the leaders that do understand how policies can influence the direction they go in terms of achieving their mission also make the time and investments. So one barrier is usually leadership and lack of understanding of how how to go about, creating an IT policy when, they are simply focused on raising funds, for instance, for their nonprofit organization, helping and hunger across the globe. So, lack of understanding in that space has been, and usually it's not a completely ignorance. It's just they just don't have the understanding of how important IT policies are. Until recently, where we are seeing more awareness in terms of data, how data is the new currency. So you may find that nonprofit leaders are asking for assistance. They're reaching out, asking their IT managers if they are large enough, or asking their other colleagues within the space about what other nonprofit organizations are doing about securing their data from adversaries and so on.
That is a perfect segue into our next slide, where we're going to talk about prioritizing, how to prioritize IT and what to prioritize. So I think you just hit the nail on the head that it's with, like, if you've just done a press conference because something is on fire in your sector and you're trying to also manage your donations and your funding, carving out the time to write a policy is maybe it's on the last thing on your list that you want to be doing. But it really just leaves you so vulnerable if you don't have those policies in place. At least a policy is a place to start. And then you can work from there toward training, making sure your staff are doing all of the acceptable use and best practices to keep your data safe, your organization safe, and themselves safe as well. So I think we would start out with kind of, as you were talking about, Nura, the leadership and creating that IT roadmap. So we just are going to scratch the surface again today. We do have a couple of webinars on how to create an IT roadmap. We talk a little bit more in there about how to get your leadership on board with it or help them. Maybe you have somebody on your nonprofit board who's tech fluent who can jump in and kind of help your executives make the time and space to do an assessment and create that roadmap. And we know that that roadmap is going to be individual, right? You can't just find a template online and make that your roadmap. Um, and those priorities are going to be unique to your nonprofit. So I think, Nora, when we were talking about doing this webinar, we identified several areas, and it was reflected in the questions that people had at registration around cybersecurity, data security, and staff security. And of course, financial security, but that isn't something that we can really help you with.
Mhm.
Although, if you have good cybersecurity, it might help your donors feel better that their money is going to get to you. So can you talk a little bit about these different categories, the cybersecurity, data security, and staff security, and kind of what we advise nonprofits to do in these realms right now.
Yes, thank you. Certainly, security is a hot topic these days, and having an understanding of security is an umbrella that has many domains under it. And one big domain is data security. But I'll go back a step where we have cybersecurity here because it touches on, it's the cyberspace and most likely your behavior or your identity over the internet. We know that these days a lot of nonprofit organizations leverage cloud applications or services to access their data, whether it's email on Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace or files on Box, Dropbox. They're still using web services or cloud services to access that information. So the identity is really very important. A lot of the cyber criminals these days try to steal your identity one way or the other. So having a way or solution to help you monitor that identity as the identity moves from one service to another. And if there's any compromise in the identity, quickly having a mitigation solution that would help you secure and protect and isolate that identity and resolve the issue. It's a direction that we are seeing nonprofit organizations buy into. And those kind of monitoring solutions these days are pretty robust. You would be amazed at how quickly they are able to detect and attempt to hack into your account from a country. So no longer do you need a whole IT department just monitoring your identities, but you can actually get a service that can do that for you while you focus on your nonprofit's mission and trying to help you achieve your goals. With data security, it's important to make sure your data is contained, secured, and ensure that only the people that need access have access to your data. And a lot of the bad actors these days, they are looking to mine your data so they can probably to your funders, get to your donors, and therefore it needs some financial reasons. So having a way to ensure your data is encrypted, whether it's at rest, it's with a provider that actually cares about security, with a provider that actually can protect you in case of a subpoena, it's important. So an assessment, going back to that topic of an assessment, does give you an evaluation of your current state, the gaps, and then a roadmap would help you identify where you need to make investments, but the ones that you want to start in the first year, second year, third year, and down in the future. Uh, so staff security is important. Certainly, the safety of your employees is necessary. These days, we do have work from home. So a lot of the infrastructure is basically the internet connection that you have, and then the laptops that people are using to connect to the internet and the services that are provided. Oftentimes, that's the model we seek. A lot of nonprofit organizations will have that flexibility in terms of hybrid work environments, or some of them are fully remote. But the device that the staff use is important, and your role at the organization is also important. If you're a finance staff or someone in HR, people and culture, uh, you have high confidential sensitive data that you're working with. So you are likely going to be a target because the bad actors are looking for high value employees that could be a target. So ensuring that the safety of your security, your staff is ensure that you will make that investment, give them machines that are secure, give them a high assurance security access like multi-factor authentication that has its own kind of security key so that whoever tries to break in and access that information, it's harder for them to get any valuable information because you've made the right investment. The last piece of financial security, I'll pass it back to you, Carolyn, because as you said, it's not kind of our core. And
I
I'm sure there are other experts that can provide guidance.
Yeah, no, it's not really our bailiwick.
Yeah.
But I will say that I guess I would just say this is something that I've heard. It's not like none of these things are easy. We can just sit here and say like, oh, you should do this, you should do this, your executives should make a policy and then you should all follow it. But it's like if it were easy, we would all have already done it. So I want to, just, say we're so proud of you for being this webinar and for doing what you've already done. These are our recommendations for best practices, but you definitely need to find in your own nonprofit what will work in your culture. But I have been hearing, I've been to a couple of conferences recently where there seems to be more of an ability to really talk with your funders and, like tell them what cybersecurity issues you're worried about or facing, because it's their money too, so they have an interest in helping you. If it's your staff security, you have staff that are, being attacked online by online mobs, or if it's just you want to get more training for your people to not click on those links that might be, phishing. The good news is we just had Matt do our cybersecurity incident report. Well, good news. I don't know that it's good news, but he just did a webinar about it, and really 90 to 95% of the attacks that we're seeing at our clients are still just financial. It really isn't, an adversarial, somebody trying to hack in and take all of your stuff. They really just want to take your money. And it's just some random person following an algorithm trying to get you to click on stuff and then get you to wire the money to the wrong vendor or whatever it is. And then the other good news, if it can be good news, is we do have this cybersecurity playbook that's free to download from our site. And we really think, and Matt has done crunch some numbers on this, that if you follow these best practices, like you're really going to prevent 80 to 90% of those risks and scams coming in. And a lot of the best practices aren't really expensive, like doing your staff training, having the policies in place, like following just the guidelines in our free cybersecurity playbook. And if you can prevent 80 to 90% of the risk, like please go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go quickly to this next slide, which I put a bunch of these links in the chat. But for those of you watching on YouTube or following this later, we have so many resources on our website. We really love to share these resources and hope to help the sector, become better at all of these things around IT, around cybersecurity. So please check out these resources, and they will be in the transcript as well. So now I want to move on to a poll. So this is to prepare for our next segment, and we're going to ask you, how do you budget for IT? So right now, I think a lot of us are at nonprofits are worried about the future. We're looking at the stock market going like this and thinking about how our major donors are feeling as well. I know a lot of foundations are stepping up. Some foundations are kind of stepping back. So when you're looking at your budget or revising your budget, how do you include IT as a strategic element in that budget? And so here are some options. You might go to the finance people and they take the amount that you spent last year and then they increase it or decrease it slightly. They might decrease it a lot. So that's one way you can deal with your IT budget. You could have a break fix approach. All of these categories, like there is no shame involved. We know that all nonprofits are special flowers and different processes work for different organizations, but you could have this situation where when something breaks, you fix it, and if it breaks and it costs a lot, you just got to find the money somewhere. When someone wants to try a new tool, their department approves it, so you don't really have an overall strategic plan where you're seeing, how you can get value out of the new tools that people are looking for. It's just department by department, sometimes person by person. They're like, I want to use Monday.com, and so now they have a subscription to Monday. You could also have what we think is a best practice, which is your leadership meets with your stakeholders, updates your roadmap, your strategic plan, communicates everything clearly. And then you've got kind of priorities in your budget. You've got this IT roadmap, and every time you approve a new tool, it's kind of working toward that overall goal that you have. You could also put in the poll answer, like you're not sure, you don't know, this isn't kind of part of something that you deal with, or maybe you haven't thought about using your budgeting process as a way to think strategically about IT. It could be not applicable. Or it could be something else. So if there's some other way that you deal with your IT and your budget, please put it in the chat. We love to have people learning from each other. We know that you guys have a lot of best practices also, or advice or ideas. So go ahead and put that in the chat. We have some people have already used the chat. Someone says we budget by a cost per staff member. So it'll increase and decrease kind of automatically as staff numbers change. Someone says we look at our annual recurring expenses and compare that to any projected staff size for the coming year, plus add in any special IT projects we'd like to consider. That is a really smart way to go about it. Thank you. Someone else says we do an evaluation of lifespan on computers and laptops to allocate sufficient funds for replacements. Really good idea and one of our best practices. And we review upcoming projects and try to allocate funds for upcoming projects. So those are all really smart ways to do your budgeting. All right, so Nura, can you read? Can you see that? And can you read what we got?
Yes, yes. So 44% of respondents said leadership meets with stakeholders and updates our roadmap strategic plan and communicating clearly. So a large percentage actually do have leadership involved in that process. Second highest, we have 24% say finance takes the amount from last year and has an increase or decrease based on whatever projections they have. Then we do have a tie. Some say they're not sure. Others had some of what you've described in the chat. And then lastly, there we do have about 8% that says when something breaks, we fix. And that's the approach they've taken in terms of IT budgeting. Thank you all
And
for
that
participating.
absolutely works for
Yes.
some organizations. So
Yeah.
again, I want to say there's no shade.
Hmm. Yeah.
For a lot of organizations, especially smaller organizations, I mean, we do recommend as much as you can get into those kind of cycles of if you want to replace your laptops every 3 years, then if you replace a third of them every year, then you know about how much it's going to be. That's a good way to budget for it. But absolutely, there's sometimes it just makes the most sense to like ride it into the ground, and when it breaks, you're going to have to replace it. All right, so that is it for that poll. And I want to transition into talking about budgeting for IT support. When we do an initial assessment with a client, we do take an inventory of all their devices, licenses, apps, platforms, and so on that the organization is using. But you don't need to wait for an assessment to do this. You can and should urge your nonprofit to create an IT inventory that helps you manage devices. You need to decommission your logons for staff who have left as part of their offboarding process. And if you don't have this inventory, you're not alone. Don't worry. But creating this inventory is going to help you on your way to better managing your IT. And that's one of those examples of where you can use a budget to find value. So as I said, we recommend that your laptop should not be more than 3 or 4 years old. Older than that, they have issues with updating their security patches. They'll begin to be out of warranty. They just don't work as well. They're not as efficient. People can't be as productive. They'll start to slow down your staff, or they'll need repairs. They'll need to be, you'll find that the help desk tickets from those older laptops are the ones that are taking a lot of time, and people are just losing time working. So to budget for that strategically, you're going to want to replace those laptops every year, like a percentage of them, and that allows you to plan out your hardware. So hardware, though, isn't your biggest, that isn't usually your biggest budget category. Usually it's your personnel. Um, so Nura, do you want to talk a little bit more about personnel? So your IT personnel are going to be your greatest expense, and we know that hiring IT staff who will stay with a nonprofit is very challenging. So what do we recommend?
Yeah. So challenging as it is, getting good talent has been, and especially talent that can do your IT support, do proper documentation, do some technical escalation. So someone that does have that capability is likely going to be requires a lot more and to cost a lot more in terms of their compensation. So if you're a non-profit organization that is between the size of up to 20, 15 to 20, you may want to consider outsource IT, like a managed service provider, who would provide you all the services I've mentioned here: technical support, management of your IT services, managing your inventory, ensuring that you have cybersecurity protections across your devices, your identity being protected as well. So in that size, if you're over 100, over 50, over 15 and 20 and up, you may want to consider MSP to take care of those costs for you. Smaller nonprofit organizations, however, we know there's a struggle there, because oftentimes there's a low budget and access to the free applications is very tempting, or the nonprofit license applications is very tempting. But then there's also concern about training internally for staff, because you're small, you can train maybe a few employees, but then as you begin to grow and add more staff, then you're likely gonna run out of the capacity to actually manage a smaller nonprofit organization. So in the beginning, it may seem attractive to save cost, but eventually you may want to consider looking at an MSP to grow. And as you scale, the MSP can scale with you because MSP is agile and can handle a lot more capacity for IT support.
Yeah, it kind of puts the burden on us to find the great people to hire.
Yeah.
And also we like when you're looking for an MSP, I put some resources in the chat as well around, how do you know if you're ready for an MSP, if it makes sense for you, some vetting questions to use if you're not happy with your MSP, you're looking for a new one. We put together a download that has some questions to ask. But I will also say that if you're struggling to manage your IT and you're under, you're smaller than 20 staff, 15, 20 staff. We did a webinar a little while back about growing using Google Workspace, which is
Hmm.
very easy to set up on your own if you're not an IT person, um, and kind of how to manage that as you grow. And so that webinar I also put in the chat to give people some, like you can delve in if that's something that you're dealing with. The one thing about Google Workspace is it doesn't really force you to put a lot of security in place. It can just kind of like it's very user friendly. So it's not going to tell you like, oh, this isn't secure or you need to have an administrator doing this, that sort of thing, which on the Microsoft side you do get. So, we have some advice in that webinar about trying to make your Google Workspace as secure as you can. It is a secure platform. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that because it's so non-tech user friendly, there may be some things in there that you have to think about or know to do to make it more secure. And
Yeah.
I also did a webinar a little while ago about training up internal managers. So, as you said, Nura, it can be hard to hire those IT specific people, but you may have some staff on in your organization already that are, like they're really excited about it, or they're, first adapters, they're already using AI tools, they just get excited about it. And we did a webinar a little while back about a friend of the organization, friend of the pod, who does these training sessions to help executives communicate better with maybe their internal and person, and maybe move somebody who's an accidental techie in to get the training and the professional development so that they can manage the IT for a smaller organization. So that sometimes is a good, it is a, it hopefully it's a good model. It's one of the models that we have. So hopefully you can make it better. But those are both some resources that we have. And then we also wanted to talk a little bit about budgeting for IT support and this kind of fixed costs versus discretionary costs debate. So when you're facing challenges and financial challenges, it's very natural to think, well, I'm just gonna put off any projects. I'm gonna hold on to that discretionary, like nice to have instead of the must have items for IT. And I'm gonna wait until we have a better financial, outlook, or we have some staff that are changing right now, or we have some other challenges going on. So I'm gonna put those off and I'm gonna focus on the fundamentals. But Nora, we wanted to talk a little bit about when your fundamentals are not up to speed, you may need to prioritize time and sometimes funding for a project to get your fundamentals to where you want them to be. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, the fixed costs are kind of obvious, but I think an assessment, or at least you know what you need to keep the lights on. For instance, you need to make sure your licenses, the subscription you're paying for, you pay them timely. You need to make sure people have robust equipment that they use or devices, most likely having them under warranty for any event that the hardware fails, you can get that replaced. Um, but however, there are some additional, in order to have a well-managed IT, you would definitely want to consider some fundamentals such as having IT policies. And we can never emphasize enough the importance of IT policies because we've seen successful organizations having just, regardless of their size, but having those fundamentals actually thrive and they have a better managed IT or even well-managed IT because of those fundamentals. So there are cost components to it. Fixed costs, we want to keep the lights on. We want to make sure that that is covered. But we want to also strategically look at first year, second year, the decisions that we're trying to make now in spending a little bit more to get some of those fundamentals in place will help us in the future. So really looking at those fundamentals and taking them seriously is what we want to emphasize here. That not only do you want to keep the lights on, but you also want to be strategic in ensuring the fundamentals are taken care of and you're making strategic investments in them because they will help you in the future in improving the overall IT experience and also maybe save you some money because you're no longer running into risks and wishing that you had spent that money earlier.
I think I'm always amazed how many clients come to us, and when we do that assessment, they have sometimes 20 or more licenses or accounts for people who have left their organization. And so not only are you paying for that you're no longer using, but that's basically an open door into your organization that hopefully that person who left isn't disgruntled. But even if they left and they're fine, but that's just a login that's hanging out there and it could be breached and you might not even know about it. So making sure to do that assessment. And I didn't put on here making that data map. So with your stakeholders, going through department by department and learning where the data is, what tools are they using that are storing something that's important about your organization or your clients or your work. You need to know where that data is, make the policy about retaining that data and keeping it secure. So knowing what vendors are storing your data, what accounts have access to your data. If your data is in these different silos, often that's for a reason. So, who has those admin accounts and who has the other, like regular logins. You need a map, then you need a plan, and you may need more training. You may need a different onboarding and offboarding process. You may need a different approval process for new tools so that they get properly vetted, that it's a secure tool. I would think we've all seen some news reports recently of, you know, people using tools that weren't that secure they were supposed to be. So all of this is ways to protect your organization. But I think in this moment, like that's one thing I want to convey is that nonprofits, maybe over for profits, have this ethos and your staff who are really dedicated to what you do and they really care about what you do in your organization. So enlisting them to help protect your organization is a lever that some for-profit companies don't have. For them, it's just a job, but for us, we really care. And speaking of caring, I'm going to move into this topic of self-care in nonprofit roles. So I did a webinar on this last November. I learned so much. I challenged so many of my own assumptions about what you need to do to stay balanced, stay healthy, stay motivated, not burn out. I know we have a lot of stress all around us all the time. Well, and one thing that I learned in this webinar is that I thought, like you really need to like have an hour-long massage or do an hour of yoga to reset. And what the research shows is that you really don't need to take a big chunk out of your day. Like doing a 5-minute reset several times a day is as effective or more effective than taking a long pause. So it is still important to eat lunch, not at your desk, not reading emails. Like make time that you're away from work to actually be away from work and decompress and unplug. But definitely there's a lot of good stuff in that webinar. So I hope you'll check it out if you're looking for kind of mental health and physical health advice. One thing I want to say is for leadership, if you're in a leadership role, like definitely lead by example. Check in on the stress levels of your staff, share some de-stressing techniques, communicate, and practice good change management. There's like in the best of times, change management around IT can be extremely stressful. But now, when we have a lot of external stresses coming in and you want to change something, you want to change a policy, change a tool, whatever it is that you're working on that's changed, make sure you do a lot of change management around it so that your staff know what you're doing, why you're doing it, how it's going to impact them, what they need to do to be part of the plan, just so they feel heard and that they're part of what you're doing. Um, since the pandemic, luckily, and we're all working from home, I think a lot of nonprofit staff are more likely to check in with each other and are more aware of the value of good physical and mental health in our workplaces. My train is going by outside. But definitely, if you're an IT staff person, make sure that you're putting self-care first on your daily list. I had a good friend who told me this a while back. If you don't do your self-care first and you burn out, you're not going to be helping anybody else on the help desk. You're not going to be doing any more IT, budgeting. You're just going to be burnt out and need to take some mental health days. So making sure that you take care of yourself is really important at all times, but especially when there's lots of stuff going on out, in the world that's impacting us. So I'm going to go ahead and share this link to that webinar that I did on stress and self-care. And then for funders, I don't know if there's any funders on this on the webinar today, but definitely understanding and prioritizing that IT support that you're giving to your grantees. We're really hopefully in a world of a lot of our funders have that trust-based philanthropy that they're following, where they're really listening and interacting to the grantees and finding out what the grantees really need from them. And IT support, I can guarantee you 100%, 110%, 120% is something that nonprofits need from their funders. So anything you can do to help them at this time is necessary. All right, so now we're going to move into our review. We have a lot of free resources on our website around all of these issues. Nura, do you want to read through some of these bullet points just to make sure people get them?
Yes, this review is going to help us just make sure we have some take-home lessons here throughout the webinar. So, making a strategic plan for your IT roadmap is important because it gives you a plan of execution and prioritization and understanding the dependencies. You build on a foundation, and then you keep increasing and scaling up and improving the overall IT experience and making sure you have well-managed IT for your organization. So ensuring that you make those investments and having an IT roadmap. Then agreeing on the priorities with stakeholders. Don't let IT needs coast while distracted by a poly crisis, because certainly IT can be left behind because there are many other priorities. But think of IT as integral to actually helping you achieve your mission. And then IT is going to get that priority and the much needed investment. Then prioritize leadership time to create and review policies. Policies. They're part of your fundamentals. We are highly recommending that you make those investments, and leadership needs to make that time to create them. Performing an assessment. An assessment will help you know your current state, will help you identify the gaps. We'll also take a look at some recommendations around consolidation of systems. You may be coming out of a legacy on-premise infrastructure into the cloud. Maybe you have many services that you're using in the cloud where they are duplication of services. So an assessment will help you identify those gaps and where you can consolidate and save money. then understanding your inventory. And I think the assessment also has a component of helping you build out an inventory. But if you don't have an assessment done, you need to spend time to identify having that data map, knowing your license subscriptions, your hardware, and keeping a track of all of these different domains across your inventory, ensuring you know what you have, and then making sure you are making the right investments in that space. Uh, then use your budget to review fixed IT costs and discretionary spending. That's what we highlighted there. We know what you should have a good understanding of what your fixed IT costs are, and then knowing exactly when to look at that at discretionary spending and making the right investments and spending money wisely there. So know that you may need to spend money and time on a project to improve your fundamentals. And then lastly, there it says stay healthy. That's very important. We can't help anyone if after being burnt out. So we really want to be healthy and the right state of mind. Thank you.
Yeah, and we have a great question who just came in, and I'll say to everybody else, we're in the Q&A section right now. So if you have some questions for Nura, please go ahead and put them in. So Chandra asks, what tips do you have for managing up and helping leadership understand why investment of time and money, and actually for a lot of things we talked about today, it's mostly time, like getting that committee together, putting aside that hour a week or a month to do these things, why investment in IT security is so essential. And she says there's often pushback when we introduce this topic. So, in your work with clients, do you have some tips, a couple of things that you could tell them to try?
So uh, usually leadership, from my little experience, like a story. They like to know the risks. What is the risk to the business? How is this security essentials not having them? How it's not having a good security essential or fundamentals risky to our business? Is it gonna harm our reputation? Is it gonna damage the work that we do? Is it gonna hurt our data? Is it gonna affect our funders? And then looking at other similar nonprofit organizations that have faced security threats or have been compromised due to lack of investment. So as they see these realities, they are smart enough, they are clever to make those choices and given it time, because those are realities that they have to deal with if it comes to their organization being impacted by security risks.
I would say, in my experience too, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our next webinar in a moment, but if you can find other champions or cheerleaders for you that can kind of triangulate and keep presenting this as a problem, as a
Hmm.
business problem that
Yeah.
needs an executive solution. If there's somebody on your board that understands that maybe your technology isn't where it needs to be, or just somebody on a podcast that I was listening to said just putting that meeting on somebody's calendar, like just say, I need to meet with you, once a week until this is over, and or once a month or however often it is, and just get the time on their calendar, and then go in there and talk about it. But just making that a regular occurrence can help make it a priority. And also, if it's monthly or however often you decide to do it, that executive has time for it. Um, they don't have to do anything in between. They can just come into that meeting and then, be ready to tell them, lay out the story, as Nora was saying. And then the next month it's going to be easier because they have that, background, and then you can come in and start doing things and getting things changed. So, but it's really, really, really hard. So keep at it. That's all I can say is keep at it. It's hard when you're the person who can see the technology path and you have to get the other people to come along with you. So it's not easy. All right. Someone also says in chat is sharing that each leader, person, decision maker also has a number of people and times that they need to hear something before they make that shift. That is definitely true. The more often you hear it, in your personal life too. The fifth time you hear something, you're like, oh, I actually have to do something about that. So for sure that can help. Um, so we had another couple of questions about it, and I don't know, Nora, if you want to respond to some of our questions from the registration. A lot of them were around cybersecurity, and I'm thinking also that what we were just talking about, that cybersecurity can also be your way in, because it really is top of mind for a lot of people, and especially in this environment. And I'll just tell the short anecdote that I did a podcast with somebody who was telling me that they had a board member for this nonprofits organization who was sued by somebody else for something else. But through the discovery for that lawsuit, all of their board emails also were discovered, had to be turned over to the subpoena. So, I don't like to scare people because we also say that if you're doing the fundamentals, if you follow the playbook, like I said, you can eliminate, protect yourself from 80 to 90% of the threats against you. So this is not something that's impossible to do, but definitely sometimes that exposure to risk can be a lever that you can use with your executives as well.
Yeah.
So I'm just reading through our comments. I want to make sure that I have time to tell you about our next webinar and go over the learning objectives. So if you have another question, please get it in. And like I said, I'll ask Nora to give us some answers and we'll put them in the transcript, which will be up in about a week. So I want to go over quickly our learning objectives. So we wanted to learn about IT governance policies, why they're an absolute necessity. We talked about a couple of the reasons why some nonprofits don't have them. But hopefully this will spur you to get those policies in place. Policies, policies. And it doesn't do any good if they're just sitting there, no one ever looks at them after their first day at work. They're like, oh, I have the employee handbook, and then I never refer to it again. So make sure that you're checking on compliance. You have somebody who owns that policy and is looking back, like, are we using AI the way that we have said that we want to? Are we checking our vendors where our data is stored to make sure they have cybersecurity on their end? All of those sorts of good things. We wanted to learn what to prioritize in our IT. Nora did a great job talking about cybersecurity, data security, staff security, other basics. We wanted to learn about budgeting for IT and where you can find some value and some more resources on how to budget if you're undergoing budget review, depending on what's happening at your nonprofit. We wanted to talk about staying healthy and motivated and review how to make a plan to move forward. So I'm really excited to talk to you about next month's monthly webinar. I want to invite you back for a special webinar led by Alethea Hanneman from board.dev. It's an organization formed to educate for-profit tech leaders on how to join nonprofit boards and help them utilize technology to achieve their mission, which is something we're really excited about. But board.dev also educates nonprofits on all the good reasons to recruit someone fluent in tech to your board and how you might go about doing that. And they also make introductions and will help train your new board member on the ways nonprofits are different from for-profit boards and like try to help them get up to speed on the lingo and make them a success, helping you with your technology. They have pulled together a lot of research on how a tech fluent board member can really help nonprofits succeed. But they don't just try to convince you. They do help you take those steps and are part of the process, making the introductions. So that's going to be on Wednesday, June 18th at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. And you can register on our website now and check out communityit.com/webinars for all our past webinar videos and to register for our monthly webinar series. Our podcasts are on there too. We love to hear you on the podcast. We're on LinkedIn. Follow us. We share a lot of content and resources there as well. So we just, love sharing with our with our community. And I want to thank you, Nora, so much for spending this hour with us and sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you for having me.
And I want to thank everyone who joined us today. It was an hour out of your day. I really appreciate you giving us the gift of spending your time with us. I hope that something in our webinar today was useful. It's something that you'll be able to take home and use at your organization. I hope that you're able to continue feeling healthy, finding joy, doing the things that you love, even in, as I say, it's a poly crisis. There are lots of things going on all at the same time. We know there's a lot of stress out there. We were hoping that this webinar would help take a little bit of stress out. I want to say that when you take action, it really helps you feel better. And some of these actions, if you've been going from press release to crisis meeting to, figuring out your budget to trying to serve the people that you serve, putting aside an hour a week to just sit and do like your data map, it can be a time to decompress, slow down, but you're still taking action. You're not vegging out. You're just like doing something that needs to get done, but it's a kind of a different part of your brain that's doing it. So maybe that's another way to find the time to prioritize this. But I want to thank everybody again for joining us, and I'll let you go on to the rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much.